The second part to all this, it's all about genetics and low back pain. You do hear people on the internet talking about genetics. It's not exercise that's causing your lower back pain, it's your genetics causing your lower back pain. And what I'm going to say is it's all of it. And I want to explain the limitations to the genetic argument as well. Because it's not as straightforward as, sorry, you're unlucky, it's your genetics. There's not a lot we can do about it. There is stuff that can be done about it, and it may not even be your genetics. It could be. I'm not saying it can. I'm not saying they're wrong. All I'm saying is that there's more information to this. There's more that we need to understand with regards to disc herniations or disc degeneration and genetics. So, as a general rule, the two injuries that get talked about with this, although one isn't necessarily an injury, is disc degeneration, where it just degenerates over time. So the genetic argument would be your genetics aren't as good, your disc degenerates faster than others, and therefore you have lower back pain as a result of your genetics. The same can be said for disc herniations as well, but with regards to disc herniations, there is a more obvious mechanical aspect to it, which then breeds out into the exercise and movement spheres, if you will. So there is more of a mechanical and movement influence with regards to disc herniations than there is with disc degeneration. Now I'm going to talk about sort of two parts to this. One is disc shape, so the influence that your disc shape has, and then the second part is the materials that your body uses to maintain the structures of the spine, if you will, mainly the intervertebral disc. So we've got basically two different shapes. One is an oval type shape spine, disc, and the other is a limacon. Now the limacon is basically, it's round, but it sort of does that as well. So it sort of goes round like that, and then there's like a dip, and then it meets. So that's the kind of shape of a limacon disc. Oval is a lot more easier to explain. It's an oval. It's not a circle. It's more of an oval. Obviously, there will be shape variations within those two, but essentially you've got a limacon shape and an oval shape. Now, there are two different ends of a spectrum here when we talk about this. What we've got is the limacon shape is very good, or let's just say better is probably a better word. The limacon is better at load bearing, but not as good at bending and twisting. So that's at one end of the scale. Then you've got the oval shape at the other end of the scale, which is better at bending and twisting and not as good at load bearing. And then you'll have your variations in between. So we've got good load bearing, we've got poor load bearing at the other end, but we've got good bending and twisting this end and not so good bending and twisting at that end. Obviously, there's mechanical aspects within that when it comes to exercise, everyday movement, when it comes to disc herniations, because with regards to disc herniations, the limacon shape is more prone to disc herniations from things like bending and twisting. Because you've got those two sort of bits that are slightly pronounced at the top. So if you can imagine, it goes round there, and then there's the dip, and then it sort of comes up and then goes around here. What basically happens is that if I just use half the disc to start with, and it's this bit that's the problem, it's that bit that's the problem, because what happens is as you bend and twist, and the nucleus pulpus migrates its way towards, or migrates its way through the fibrous, the annulus fibrosis. Because of that shape, it gets stuck and gets sort of, it navigates up through that little hook, if you will, and it concentrates and goes up through there. So that's known as that would be known as a stress concentration. So it goes up through there and just follows that path, and then you get your disc herniation. With an oval shape, because there is no, essentially the stress concentrations can be distributed around the disc more, because there isn't that sort of dip where it can concentrate, if that makes sense. So from a genetic perspective, again, you're more likely to, if you've got a limacon shape, you're more likely to herniate due to flexion, whereas with an oval shape, you're more likely to herniate via, you're less likely to herniate, but you're more likely to herniate due to load bearing. So that's kind of the first one. Material is a little bit more sort of straightforward to explain. There are certain, there's collagens. So collagen is one of the sort of the genetic factors involved in disc degeneration and disc herniation. And I've got the notes up here. I just want to make sure I get this right. So it's collagen type 1, 9 and 11. So they're your three main types. There are more than I'm going to explain, but again, it's just to give you an understanding. Then you've got interleukins 1 and 6, cartilage intermediate layer protein, and agrican, or agrican. So all of these are the different materials. Now, obviously, some have more material or more of these materials than others, because it's what makes up the nucleus pulpus, it's what makes up the annulus fibrosis. So if your body is constantly turning these over, so getting rid of old stuff and putting in new stuff, then it's going to last longer. But if there is a point at which it's putting in some, but it hasn't got more to put in of others, then there's going to be sort of the disc isn't going to renew quite as well. Now, this brings us to the limitation with regards to the genetic argument, and I should say that's shared on the internet, because most people that are talking about someone's lower back pain or lower back pain in general either don't understand that there's all these different sort of caveats that come with it, but also they don't know your lower back pain, or they don't know your lower back, I should say. Because when someone comes to see me, unless they have an MRI scan and unless they have a breakdown of the genetic makeup of themselves, I have no way of knowing that disc degeneration was because of a genetic factor. There is one, I guess, there is one loose way of interpreting it, and that is a thin spine and a thick spine. That's one way of interpreting it. But again, a thicker spine will generally be able to load bear well, which would suggest that it would be a limacon shape. A thinner spine that can bend and twist more would suggest it would be an oval shape. So you can use that as an indicator, but I don't, because that doesn't, just because someone's got a thin spine or is a thin build doesn't mean they have an oval shape, and vice versa. So again, I don't, me personally, I don't know. I don't have those, I don't have that kit to tell what, and I'm going to imagine most people talking on the internet don't have that kind of kit to be able to tell someone that it's their genetics. So to use it as an argument as to why someone has lower back pain over another person, it's useful having the information, and if someone does have the ways of measuring these types of things, then that's all well and good. You can include it in the argument, but I can't see the use of using genetics as a way of saying that's causing your back problem. It's your genetics. Scientific studies are fine, but that's not the person that stood in front of me with back pain. That's the last thing they want to hear. Oh, I'm sorry, it's your genetics. There's nothing I can do. Off you go. What's more useful is the mechanical aspect of it. Because there are, and as we've described, there is a mechanical aspect to the limicon and the oval shape. So if we can understand someone's pain pattern, so it initially happened when they were flexing their spine, picking a pen up off the floor, doing a deadlift, whatever it may be. And when we watch them do a deadlift, they've got a rounded spine. And when we watch them sit in a seat, they sit with a slouched posture. And when they sit in their car, they've got these really deep sort of bucket type seats, so their spine is nicely flexed in there. Their occupation is, there's a lot of sort of bending over that's required for it to pick things up or whatever it may be. You can start to see that, okay, flexion seems to be a bit of a problem here. They've got a disc herniation, which is, as a general rule, loaded flexion of the spine, that repetitive nature to it, the straw that broke the camel's back. So they've explained that. They've explained their lifestyle, their occupation, and you've understood that flexion is just a constant recurrence in their lower back pain. Now, someone with poor genetics, that will work a lot faster than someone with great genetics. So someone with great genetics will get away with that for a little bit longer than someone with poor genetics. But the one common factor is that mechanical loading and flexion is deteriorating the condition of the spine. It just means the genetic element to it is not giving them the outcome as quick, if that makes sense. So we can see that there is a mechanical aspect to the problem. So what's going to be more effective is addressing all of that mechanical, behavioural type of aspects of their pain. By using the genetics as an argument or as a diagnosis, it's not terribly useful unless you've got the information in front of you and it says your type 9 collagen doesn't exist. Your type 1 collagen is really poor. Your interleukins 1 and 6, they're not great. If you've got that information, then okay, you can start to say it's starting to look like your genetics ain't great. But even then, it's not going to be advantageous for them to continue flexing the spine, loading the spine, sitting for long periods of time with a flexed spine. Again, still the mechanical aspect of it is still going to be influencing their lower back pain, whether they've got great genetics or poor genetics, if that makes sense. So hopefully it should start to make hopefully there's some clarity there that where genetic information is useful, it doesn't necessarily bear that much significance when it comes to actually dealing with a person that stood in front of you and what you need to do with them. Because whether they've got good genetics or poor genetics, they're in pain, they want to get out of the pain, and we need to be able to do that, and the best we can do is with the mechanical aspects of it. So we need to understand those mechanical aspects, and that's essentially what, the courses that I deliver are there to promote. It's not that I don't have the genetic information to share with people, I just don't see it as terribly useful when it actually comes to solving someone who's in lower back pain. So hopefully that brings some degree of understanding to disc herniations, disc degeneration, and genetics. It's not something that one needs to beat themselves up for. Oh, I've got poor genetics. Oh, it's my genetics. It's like, okay, fine. That's the way they are. In some respects, you kind of deal with it in the same way, whether your genetics are bad or good. And if your genetics are bad, then it can be a blessing that you're actually going to focus on proper mechanics of the spine now. Whereas the people with good ones, they're always, they can, because they can get away with it, they're lazy with regards to the biomechanics of their spine. So, yes, I could go off on this for a little bit longer, but I won't. So what we'll do is we'll go on to the next one, which is the understanding a little bit more and solving the multifaceted lower back pain aspect.